Richard Beard acquired the land in the 1680s from Lord Baltimore, and he established a grist mill at Old Man Creek or Beard's Creek. In 1702, Thomas Robinson bought the land, and his son was O'Neill Robinson. He built the house around 1745, 1750, and Elijah Robinson inherited the house and the land in 1768. And he was the colonel in the Revolution in the Maryland Militia 7th Battalion, and he was a justice of the peace, and he was also when he had it as a tavern. To go from Baltimore to Annapolis, you went either by boat or you went around the Severn, stopping at Rising Sun Tavern, or you came across the Severn Ferry and came up B&A Boulevard and stayed at the Robinson House. The inventory of Elijah's estate in 1796, they listed the schooner Nancy and some bateaus and some canoes that were down at his pier at Robinson Landing. I know he had 30 slaves at that point, so it was a thriving agricultural area, probably a lot of tobacco. They also had the mill, so they had industry, they had the tavern, agricultural business. They had the pier down at Robinson Landing, and they'd put the produce on the schooner and take it either north to Baltimore or south to Annapolis. It was about 700 acres until 1837, when it was sold from the Robinsons to the Tidings. At that point, it was 500 acres and it sold for $2,000. The silhouette that I have here is of Beal Randall, who married Martha Robinson, and he's the one that sold it to the Tidings. And then John Tidings died in the 1840s. His son John Lewis was here until 1899. His daughter was Laura Tidings Garcelone. She was born in 1874 and died in 1955. And in her will, she said, when I pass, I want the land and the house to be sold to the Evetts. They were only one generation here. The Robinsons were 4 generations, the Tidings were 3 generations, the Evetts were only 1, but they were significant. They were here over 50 years, from 1928 to 1979. And they developed the Berrywood community out of 140 acres and left the house on 10 acres. A developer came in on the last 10 acres, developed the Berrywood West community on the 9 acres, and left the house on 1 remaining acre. The fireplace in our living room is original. The paneling is not, but that has not changed. Here's 3 centuries of flooring. The first here is the original 1745, 1750 flooring. And over in the dining room, that was replaced in the 1880s when they took down the hearth to close off the fireplace and put up the partition. And then the oak flooring is covering up the original 18th century flooring. And that was done probably in the early 20th century. The dining room fireplace was closed off from the 1880s until I opened it back up in 2013. And to the left of the fireplace are the stairs going down to the basement. And what looks like a large fireplace in that room is not a fireplace, but the relieving arch, which is simply the foundation for the dining room fireplace above it. Over in the corner here is a display case. This shows a lot of the artifacts from our archaeology that we did before we put the modern addition back on the north side, where the addition was taken down in the 1880s. Now leaving the artifact room, we enter the largest room, which has one of the larger fireplaces around. It's the modern addition that we built in 2013. And we tried to hide all the modern conveniences. So we have the cooktop is completely black, blends in with the soapstone. We've hidden the oven behind the curly maple island. In the corner we have the television hiding above the microwave, which is below. The dry sink to the left is the dishwasher hidden. To the right is the trash and recycling bins. To the right of the dry sink is the refrigerator that's hidden. And then back in the pantry, we have the washer and dryer, and that's where the freezer is hidden behind an old door. But I built the island, I built the range countertop, the dry sink, the refrigerator enclosure, and going into the half bath, I made a recreation of a shaker dry sink. I made a complementary, what we call the golden throne, which is the toilet that I've hidden behind a wooden frame to blend in more with the 18th century style. My wife and I both like the simple shaker style, so that's why we kind of leaned that way. The house was built of sandstone, or sometimes called fieldstone, and it's one of only 2% of the houses built in the county at that time period were out of sandstone. Most were either post and beam construction or log construction, and that's why it's still here, and the others have all perished over the centuries. All right, walking around to the southern side, you'll see there's walk-in basement to the large keeping room, we call it, the Tavern Room. And that's where the small windows, they knew what they were doing back then, because on the southern side, they had, I think, a window on the first floor, 2 windows on the second floor, 2 windows on the third floor in the attic. And on the north side, there were no windows at all, except there was just the one door they had. Doing some gardening, we ran into some bricks on the west side of the house. And we realized that they were rain gutters that had been covered up over time, so we uncovered those. All right, walking around to the west side is where B&A Boulevard was, well, still is. I was researching how millstones work, and the one over here has a dovetail on it. That's upside down. That would have been the top stone, called the runner stone, and the one on the west side would have been the bed stone, would have been the flat stone on the bottom. A couple places where they say it came from the Beard's Mill right up the road here. In the 18th century, they liked symmetry, so both sides of the house are symmetrical with a center hallway. And so the east side would have been the waterfront, and the west side would have been the road front. On the left here is, we believe from Al Lukenbach, the county archaeologist, looked at the framing, and he thought it was from 1800 to 1825. The door is probably an 18th century door that's been repurposed. The cemetery is laid out with a 70 by 70 cast iron fence, and just inside the gate is Elijah's headstone. He was born in 1731, died 1796, and to his right is his third wife, Mary Robinson, who died in 1815. And she's the one that went in her obituary in 1815, the Gazette said that she died in her 62nd year. Her venerable mansion, situated on the public line from the Severn Ferry to Baltimore, was always a receptacle for the wearied traveler. It was under her roof they found repose. The front half of the cemetery are Robinsons, the back half are all Tidings. John died in 1840s, he's buried there. His brother, who died in 1866, is buried there. And John Lewis Tidings died in 1899, he's buried up there with his wife and 2 of his daughters. My wife and I were always interested in history. We lived up in Pennsylvania in an old historic house up there for 3 years, and we moved down here. And one day I had a luncheon with somebody over in Serena Park, and we rode by and saw that it was for sale, and I was always curious about it, so we took down a number, called the realtor, one thing led to another, and that's how we acquired it. And it's the old cliche, it's like, we don't feel like we own it, we're just the caregivers for a short time, just keeping it going. We had some antiques, but I don't like conjectural restoration. It was like, that's where you force yourself like a bias onto it. So I tried to let the house speak to me and just do like a minimalist restoration. Bill Evatt let us know that his parents, who lived here from 1928 to 1979, they put their ashes up in the cemetery when they passed, and I suspect that's where we're going to end up at some point in time.